Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. Sorry, I know you couldn't hear any music. We had problems with our music today. We apologize for that, but we're glad you're here and we're ready to get started. Welcome to all of you who are joining us for the webinar and to those of you that are joining us on the live stream. If you're here on the webinar, please introduce yourself in the chat. Put your name, your location, your role in education, your interest in coaching, whatever tells us a little bit about who you are and why you're here. We'd love to know who and where you are, where you're from. Today's webinar is on instructional coach and principal partnerships. We know that instructional coaching is a really important learning design and that it can make a difference in improving outcomes for educators and for students. And we know that in order to optimize that partnership, we need really effective partnerships between principals and coaches. And today we get a wonderful opportunity to hear from a few of them. My name is Sharon Helmke. I'm the Vice President of Professional Services here at Learning Forward. I'm a longtime educator, 20 plus years now. Started out as a high school teacher in special education and AP, pre-AP, kind of the range of learners. And when my district opened up instructional coaching positions, I was one of the first to apply. I went on to coach for years and to be a coordinator of instructional coaching and had the privilege of designing instructional coaching programs. And now here at Learning Forward, I get to work with districts, regional organizations, and state organizations all across the United States and even a few overseas, helping them support the development of educational programs and instructional coaches. And I want to add that I believe so strongly in instructional coaching that I also pursued professional coaching certificate outside of education. It's something that I truly believe in as the way that we build capacity in other adults and the way we establish collegial growth with and for each other. And so I'm so privileged to be here today and to be joining all of you and hearing from the two coach principal teams that we have joining us today. So welcome to our panelists. Welcome to all of you joining us. What we're going to look at today are learning objectives. We're going to look at those learning focused partnerships between instructional coaches and their principals and how they support growth. What's the how behind it? We're going to look at some characteristics of effective building level instructional coaching programs. Here's some of the details about how the program representatives that are joining us today are working that relationship to make an effective program. You're going to get some strategies for effective communication and feedback between a principal and a coach. We're hoping that you leave today feeling empowered and ready to have those conversations with coaches and principals, that we can jumpstart those conversations on your campus. We're going to learn about how principals support coaching through their allocation of time and resources, and we're going to gather some ideas for making coaching a part of our teacher retention and support strategies. And it says teacher retention, but it's not just about teacher retention. But because when we really invest in this kind of a relationship, it makes life easier, better for everyone, students, teachers, coaches, principals, everyone in the system thrives when the partnership works well. And we're going to talk today about why that's true and how to make it happen. So we're Learning Forward. We are the stewards of the standards for professional learning. If you're not familiar with the standards, we invite you to go to our website and check them out. They are research-based frame for effective conditions for professional learning. And so they are based on what research tells us makes for an effective professional learning structure. And you can see there are 11 standards within the wheel, and they're divided into 3 frames: rigorous content for each learner, transformational processes, and conditions for success. Now, when we ask as coaches, where are we within these frames? Where is a principal-coach partnership within the standards? The answer is everywhere. Coaching touches on all of these. It's not located in a single one. It is both a learning design, a way that we support teacher learning, It also promotes culture of collaborative inquiry. I can go on and tell you how it works in every one of these. It is an integral part of professional learning, but it can't be the only form of professional learning. So coaching is integral to everything we do as professional learning when it works well, but it's also essential that principals, coaches, and programs know where to focus the efforts within this work to maximize the impact. So we are everywhere across this frame today. So I mentioned how passionate I am about coaching, and I want to start kind of framing this work today in our conversation around my experience. When I was a teacher, I was one of those very first instructional coaches in my district, and I was assigned to 2 different campuses. Half my week was spent on one, half my week was spent on the other, and I coached ELA and social studies. And my 2 experiences on those 2 campuses couldn't have been more different. One of my campuses was a struggling middle school. It was already on the state's radar as a school in need of improvement. Principal had been there. It was the start of his 2nd year when I was hired, but he was an amazing instructional leader. He really brought us together and communicated high expectations to teachers, not because we were on a state watch list, but because, as he communicated it, we all know our students deserve better and we know we can do it. We just have to work together and figure out how to make that happen. And he was very community-minded. It was all of us together making this happen. It was never evaluative or punishment-oriented. And when he introduced the role of coaches in that first year, he talked about us as a way of helping teachers learn and grow, and that he was going to hold these high expectations because we held them for ourselves and we held them for our students. And we had this amazing resource of instructional coaches who were going to be out there with teachers making it happen. And he told teachers that we were going to ask challenging questions. We were going to ask them to think about what they're doing. And does it have to be this way? And how else could it be? And that we were really going to challenge them to dig deep and try new things. And always it was going to be to help them meet the expectation that he held, that we held as a community for helping students thrive. So it was very much this community effort, and we were at the heart of it all together, making this work happen. And we did it. In less than a year, we moved from the lowest performing middle school to the top performing Title I school in our district. And we had schools from all across the state coming to watch instruction in our classroom. Our students were thriving, our teachers were thriving. It was an amazing experience. I'm sure you can hear it in my voice. It's still one of the high points of my career. My other campus, where I went for the second half of the week, was a successful middle school. It was a middle performing middle school. The principal had a far more laissez-faire style of leadership. He hired good teachers, he put them in classrooms, he let them do the work. And when he introduced the coaching role, he said, they're here to help you. Let them know what you need. When you need something from them, they'll come into your classroom and they'll help you. Not much happened on that campus. There was no change in instruction. There wasn't much growth. And mostly I sat in my office and ran data reports and generated stuff for station work. The 2 experiences couldn't have been more different. And I showed up as the same coach at both campuses. So the biggest difference I experienced was the principal and the way they viewed the role of coaches, the way they worked with coaches, and the way they created those expectations for teachers. And that was a foundational piece of learning for me. I went on to do research in how principals and coaches work together to maximize impact. And the way I've come to think about it is as 2 sides of the same coin. And that comparison works well for me because you can think of expectations as being one side of the coin and support to reach those expectations is the other side. And like a coin, they have to fit together. Both are essential. You can't have the face of the coin without the back of the coin, or vice versa. And at the same time, you can't put both sides on one side. You have to have a separation of establishing this high expectation and the resource to meet it. So the principal sets the expectation, and the coach becomes the resource that partners with teachers to make that happen. And then you're really optimizing those results. And I am excited to have 4 incredible educators with us today who can help talk to you about how to make that happen and share their experiences. We have with us Crystal Cooper. She's principal at Starling Elementary in Gwinnett Schools. She has experience on both the coaching side of it and the principal side of it. And she's joined by her coach, Devanya Prather. She's a coach in Gwinnett Public Schools. You see her on your screen reading rules behind her. I love it. I was an ELA coach too. They're going to talk to us about their partnership. We're also going to hear from Larissa McCoy from Lido High School in Hillsborough. And the coach who's joining her is Robin Sullivan Jackson. She's a literacy coach also at Lido High School in Hillsborough. And so I don't want to take up any more time with my talking because I really am anxious to hear from these panelists. So we're going to get started with our panelists. We're going to hear.
Thank you so much, Sharon.
Go ahead, Crystal. Sorry, Crystal.
Thank you very much, Sharon. I really appreciate your opening and building that context for us. And thank you to everyone who's joining us. We have about 165 people or more on our webinar today. So that's really exciting. And thank you. I've been taking a little look at the chat box, and I see that there's so many of you from different areas, different types of schools, different levels. I saw someone working on a dissertation related to coaching, which is exciting. So my hope is that this short conversation that we'll have will yield some more of reflection, inquiry, and also help you be able to maybe see that what you're doing can be reinforced, or be able to add some ideas to your work. So very quickly, my background builds some context in our story at Starling Elementary in Gwinnett County Public Schools, which is right outside of Atlanta, about 30 minutes outside of there. I was a former literacy coach in New Jersey, and I had the context of being a literacy coach, an assistant principal, and now I'm in my 11th year as a principal at my school. And so with my background of social emotional learning and background of culturally responsive teaching, I knew that the pathway that I always wanted to lead was a school that had that in mind and in its vision and mission. But I also had the experience of being a Learning Forward Academy graduate, class of 2018, and able to really see the roundedness of this work from many different perspectives. So I say that all to say is that I came leading a year ago at this school with a desire to really make sure that I not only clarified the positions of principal, assistant principal toward our instructional coaches and teachers, but also I worked to try to build capacity of those that I was leading. So one of the things that I wanted to share as we open is that is so important to this work is that the clarity needs to be built and the roles needs to be defined about exactly what the principal, assistant principal, and instructional coaches will do to support the teachers in the building, which we know will lead to high quality instruction. And so it has to be revealed, it has to be communicated throughout the year. Because we have found that if it isn't a message that is clearly defined, it could foster what is considered those pockets of excellence where individuals will not maybe always understand and be on the same page. My school has over 1,100 students. We have 141 schools in our school district. So we have an amazing staff development office that has trained our coaches in being endorsed in the coaching model, but also has taught us as principals through the means of the Learning Forward standards, but also blended coaching and how to deliver a true sound Starling instructional pathway at our school. So when we think about that, I always said to myself that I can't be at the school all the time, right? And so it's important that I allow my assistant principals to know the voice of the principal that's connected to the vision of the school district so that there won't be any pockets of misunderstanding as we lead our instructional coaches to support our teachers. So when we think about what this looks like in our meetings, we're very, very mindful to make sure that our message is very clear. We're very mindful to make sure that we have a structure to how we meet. So when we speak of that structure and building that strong principal-coach relationship, we do have meetings that we do have to meet in that allows us to be able to discuss the pathway, our meetings that are coming up with our planning with our teachers. And that helps us to make sure we're all on the same page. So for example, on Mondays, we have our administrator meetings where myself and just my administrators get to have a conversation, which was different than how the school performed prior to my coming. I had to adapt that change because we wanted to make sure that I had one new assistant principal, two assistant principals that had been under different leadership, and I needed to solidify our voice so that we were one. Then from there, on Tuesdays and Wednesdays at our school, we plan. And so we have literacy and math planning. Of course, we interject science and social studies conversations where applicable in those meetings. But now, and you'll see in a minute why, on Fridays, we've added a meeting with just our assistant principals and our coaches. We have two at our school that connect with that literacy and math conversation to ensure that we have everything in line for the next week's planning. So what you see on this slide here is just a pathway or framework to consider how we need to solidify the principal-coach relationship. One of the things you've heard before is that you have to have trust, and I cannot say that enough, how important it is. And in the work of learning forward, it should result in those equitable and excellent outcomes when you focus in on creating coherence, conversing enough about removing barriers, but having coaches who are credible and that know the business of teaching and learning. Because when you are hiring or you're putting these people in place of leadership, it is a visual space to the rest of the community and your school of what great teaching looks like. So it's imperative, and thankfully I have wonderful coaches at my school that have been able to showcase that so we can say, check, we definitely built in that piece of the work. But when we think about this also, I always say that we want to make sure in these meetings and these encounters with our teachers that they hear the principal voice. And what I mean by that, it's not Crystal's voice, but I have always worked really hard in my 26 years of education to really keep in mind the vision of the school district. So when I have my communication and my meetings with my the individuals that give us training and professional development, we want to make sure that that comes from the district, from my voice to the assistant principals, to the coaches and the teachers in one manner. And so when we anchor that continuous communication, it's proactive on the front end and it's reactive when we see that there's some pieces that need to be re-examined or evaluated. And so when we think about that relationship, it's collaborative. It is a relationship that allows for voice from not only my coaches, but my assistant principals, so that we can sit around the table to really bring all of our considerations, our thoughts, the information from the teachers into one space. So Devanya, who is my amazing literacy coach, she and I have only been together since August. She's going to dive a little deeper into what the other part of this framework works for us at our school.
Okay. Well, yes, I am new to Starling Elementary, but I'm not new to coaching or education for that matter. I too have been in education for 22 years. I started out as a classroom teacher in Clayton County, which is here in Georgia, South Georgia, southern part of Georgia, I'm sorry. And then I moved on to Fulton County, and now I'm in Gwinnett County. But as a coach, I have served as a coach for 11 years, and the rest of my years have been in the classroom as an EIP teacher, as a curriculum specialist, and as a consultant. So at Starling, I follow the leadership of the Dr. Crystal Cooper, who is truly a transformational leader. I am truly blessed to be here. I mean that with every fiber of my being. She's very transparent and and just supports every aspect of whatever it takes to have our children reach academic and social emotional success. So here, focus on student outcomes. With our coaching cycle, we practice the steps of planning, observing, and of course you have the questions and you have the modeling. But most important, the most important part of that coaching cycle, I would have to say, would be the questioning and making certain that I make certain that we, because I also have a math coach that I work with, that we ask open-ended questions to help the teacher, to guide the teacher to that practice or to that skill or to that particular change that needs to be made in order to better support his or her students. The district, it has been extremely supportive here in Gwinnett County with providing even instructional coaches on the district level, instructional coaches on the district level. And this has been wonderful for me because unfortunately, we did have a time where our principal, Dr. Cooper, had to step away for a while to deal with some things with, personally with her health. But however, with her APs and the district support, I was able to go forth and do those things that I was, charged to do, being a new coach here in the school building. And as a result, the implementation of the new curriculums, the implementation of the new assessment using the I-rated reading, all of that has been a tremendous success because of the collaboration here at Starling Elementary. Even down to we have an MTSS coach. We all work in tandem to make certain that our teachers are supported and our students actually are growing in the areas that they need to grow in. Ultimately, this makes an impact on teacher support and collegiality, in that it's not about the principals, just not about the coach, but I see that teachers are rising to the charge of having data-driven instruction, of leading collaborative learning. I actually had a teacher to approach me the other day about, let's have a book study. We're all in this program. And it's like, hey, I want you to be a part of this book study. So I'm so proud of that teacher for, taking the lead and then inviting me. But also the teachers are implementing best practices. Our instruction is goal oriented. And most importantly, the morale has truly been lifted here at Starling Elementary School.
So I know you're probably saying, wow, that sounds great. That sounds, really perfect at Starling. Everything seems to be working just right. And I will tell you, it has not. And so, while I am a learning forward graduate, I have all the standards in mind of how to lead. We did come to a point of shifting where, we did have a lot of challenges. We had the challenges of a new superintendent in our school district after 25 years of leading. And with that came a lot of new things. Some of those things were, a new curriculum that we were piloting at our school. And we had, unfortunately, we had a teacher pass away suddenly in December. And then when I returned from leave, we went right into the hiring season. And so the ebb and flow of the school year caused some of our conversations and our meetings to not go as well. And that was a hard sell for me, when I had to come to grips with, wow, I'm looking at the data and the data wasn't overwhelmingly low. It's just that in our cluster of schools, when we looked at some of our data, I didn't want to be number 3 and 4. I wanted to be number 1 and 1, right? So when it came to that realization and me being in classrooms and all of us just, continuing to connect, we realized we needed to make a shift. So, we came to a meeting. I started looking at the data. I started saying, hey, what do you think this is? What do you think we're dealing with? And Devanya was the one that said, well, you know what, Dr. Cooper, I'm having to go to cafeteria monitoring. And it's taking away a little bit from my classroom instruction. And it hit me like a ton of bricks because I knew better, right? I knew that we had to keep that position sacred. And I was willing to be transparent enough to make a mid-course correction and dial back and say, what can we do to improve? And so what we did was we really sat and looked at our structure. We committed to some changes as a team. And as the principal, I also was able to reset myself so that I could, continue to move forward and get us right on track. So I love the quote here that says, great leaders don't let mistakes stay or go unresolved. And it's really true. We have to be willing as principals to listen to the people that are pushing the instruction forward. And that's truly not only as an instructional leader, but I see our coaches as those, I love the planes and I think of a pilot, and I'm going to be a flight attendant when I retire, everybody knows, but I think about the pilot mindset and that flight attendant just taking the vision forward. And that's what my coaches did. And so what we're going to share for you is, some structures that we went back and revised, because these documents that we'll share here really helped us to solidify our work.
Yes. So yes, after that meeting, yes, I had to be very honest about some of my time was being shifted to other areas. And again, because I have such transformational and transparent leadership, first of all, that conversation was being facilitated. The fact that she brought us all of us, APs, coaches in the room to discuss what needed to change. And so we revisit some things, and what you see here on the screen are some of those artifacts. The first artifact, which I will drop links to these in the chat, the first artifact is our PD learning calendar for the year. And it is in an Excel document. And yes, it has every day of the school year by semester on this document. And again, this is just for our professional learning and within the building, but we also include what most people call the PLCs, we call CLTs, collaborative learning team meetings. But this helps us not only plan throughout the year, because we're constantly updating this, but it also helps us to prioritize our instructional needs and differentiate the needs for our teachers. Because also you'll see later when I go into the documents as relates to our collaborative learning team meetings, the teachers give immediate feedback of what their needs are, and then we're able to go into our PD and plan our PD calendar and plan accordingly. And also, this type of document helps us to communicate the needs of our staff. So yes, we did go back and revisit that, and we've already started planning for next year, because we are slated to get new curriculum in ELA, and some standards are changing in math. Then the document in the center here is pretty much once we're in our collaborative team meetings, this kind of defines for us what the focus of that meeting is going to be. Are we planning? Are we in the do phase? Are we in the act phase or the check phase, right? Okay, so, and I will drop links to this document in the chat to get a closer look at those. And then the last document over here on the far right is a copy of our actual meeting agenda. And if you notice in the meeting agenda, we here in Gwinnett County, we have the Quality Plus teaching strategies. So we also identify which Quality Plus teaching strategy are we focusing on this meeting? Which standard of learning are we focusing on this meeting? What part of our collaborative learning path in this meeting? And so that's what you see up here. And then you'll see more closely the components of that meeting and how the agenda flows. You go to the next slide. Excellent. So in all, what have we learned? So I'm so thankful that Dr. Cooper shared with you the moment where we had to regroup, right? We have a lot going on our campus, and we cannot ignore that we serve humans, that we're human, first of all, we're serving humans. And with that, human things happen. Life is happening around us. And so with that, unfortunately, we did have a teacher to pass away unexpectedly. We had our own principal have her own health issues. And so, but we had to regroup in the midst of all that and continue to be the voice for our teachers and the champion for our kids. And also we learned the importance of continuing to learn and to grow and be receptive to feedback, even from the coach and from the principal. And also we learned that consistency, being consistent in those meetings, continue to have those meetings with the APs and the meetings and the teachers. And we also want to continue to create visible, reflective structures, as you've seen with our documents, to make certain that all of our plans are going forth as designed and being willing to pivot. Like I said before, we had some challenges, and in that moment, and I want every instructional coach to listen to me because no, you're not admin, but have a very important voice. So it's important for you to advocate for yourself and for your teachers. Okay. So there are times when you're going to have to, nerves and all. And I was a little nervous when she asked, well, what's going on here? And I was like, should I tell her what's really going on? I've been spending more time in the lunchroom, and we had a lot of new teachers as well. So I was just overwhelmed. But yeah, advocate for yourself, respectfully, because you are important. The work that you do is extremely important. And we want to make certain that it is important to be adaptable to change. We are piloting new programs, we are piloting new standards, and change is needed, and flexibility is most important. And last but not least, don't assume anything. And I think Dr. Who can speak mostly on this about not assuming anything, but to remember the power of a conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Devanya. I think one of my really big takeaways, well, two of them actually from that was basically that shared leadership is that speaking with one voice, not the same words, but the same message, consistency. And I was just really impressed by how focused you keep those meetings on instructional improvement. It's not about putting out fires. It's about helping everyone grow, principal, coach, teachers, all of it. And I think that there's some wonderful takeaways from that. And I'm excited now to hear from our second team, from Larissa and Robin from Hillsborough.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Larissa. I am the principal at Lato High School, and Robin Sullivan is my reading coach, and we have been riding together for a good solid 14 years over the course of 2 schools. So it's really interesting to hear Crystal and her coach kind of talk because they have a new partnership. And so we'll be able to bring a little bit of a different perspective just because we've kind of known each other in a little bit of a different way. So it's interesting to always hear kind of how things are done in other places and spaces. In Hillsborough County Schools, despite the fact that we're the 7th largest district in the nation, not all of our schools have instructional coaches. So it is very rare actually for you to have instructional coaches if you're not a Title I or Renaissance school where you're receiving, federal money to be able to support and fund those positions. So in the past, we used to have a really, really strong coaching cadre where before you wanted to become an instructional coach, you went through this process and they trained you, and it was wonderful. I actually went through the cadre when I was a teacher, and it really talked and shared all of the things that coaches needed to know to be able to create relational trust and to be able to affect change in the building, and how what they were ultimately doing was supposed to be to help improve teacher professional practice to, enhance student achievement and outcomes. But that went away when different administrations kind of came in. And so now coaching really is like a grassroots effort at the school level based on the individual needs of the school and the individual really expectations of the principal. So it was interesting to hear Crystal and them talk because very similarly, we've done some things here and we don't have as many slides. We're high school people. So, elementary people, y'all come prepared. But high school people, we speak from the heart. But let me say this, it's interesting because when we first got to Lato, we got here 6 years ago, and our school was what they called in the achievement zone or the transformation zone. So it was in jeopardy of potentially having state intervention or overtake. And ultimately, I was sent here to try to figure out how to remedy that, right? How to make that different or better. I came here and inherited a bunch of instructional coaches and a lot of different teachers. And it was a very trying time for the first couple of years that we were here. And one of the things that we really had to work on first was the instructional coaching support that was in our school. It wasn't really providing the right resources for our teachers. Sometimes I think principals make decisions to fill those kinds of spaces with people who are not necessarily perfect for the job. Maybe they're helpful to the principal. Maybe there's lots of different ways people do things. But really the focus always needs to be on how are we going to improve teacher professional practice in order to, enhance student outcomes and achievement. And so it took us a little bit of time here to shift some things and move some people to the right places and get them where they were going to be most successful. And some of my coaches went back to the classroom and they rock it. Like, they are absolutely amazing in that space. And they actually weren't super comfortable in this coaching space and shared that with me when I first got here. So we had to make a lot of different changes here. And this place was really devoid of systems when we came in. There was no capacity building. The principal, it was a very top down everything. So as you can imagine, when you feel like people are doing stuff to you every day and that you don't have a voice in that, it creates a very apathetic environment, or one that's not really conducive to really embracing change or trying to make improvements. So we had a really kind of a long venture to get where we are today. But the first thing that we did whenever we came in is I met with every coach that I hired. And I have an English coach, or I have a reading coach, a writing coach, a math coach, a science coach. I got a success coach. I got all the coaches. I got coaches for days. And the truth of the matter is I knew that when we first came in here, that we were going to come up against some resistance. So it was extremely important that we were on the same page. And so right before the school year started, I actually brought all of those folks together, and we had a retreat where we talked about student-centered coaching, right? Because we were trying to find ways to make sure that our teachers weren't going to be defensive with the support that we knew they needed to provide. So if we focus on the kids and what the kids are and aren't doing, we know that speaks to the other side of the house. But if we start there, it's a little bit easier to digest. And if we can talk about what kids are and aren't doing, then maybe we'll be able to figure out how to get at the heart of what we need to shift and change here with regard to teacher practice. So that was kind of where that started. We would meet weekly, every single Monday morning, to make sure that we all understood what we were doing for the week, who was helping who. We were making sure that we weren't duplicating resources, right? Like, we had a lot of teachers that needed help in our building. So I need to make sure that Robin is not seeing the same people that Crystal's seeing or that Sharon's seeing. And so really being strategic about who was seeing who and when and why and what for was a lot of the planning that sort of took place. But in the midst of all of that, we also knew that we needed to start to build capacity here, because, like I said, teachers did not feel very empowered. Coaches did not feel empowered. The culture that existed here was one where if you were trying to push PD or anything like that, you were going to be public enemy number one. So we had a lot of shifts to make in that initial space. And so we decided that the best way to do this was to implement super strong systems. And so our way of work in terms of the instructional coaching side of the house really is a systematic approach to coaching, a systematic approach to PD, and a systematic approach to supporting and monitoring all of those things. And the coach plays a vital role in all of that, but they are not the only person, and they are certainly not the person that has to wave the flag all the time, right? And I think that was part of the mistake that was made when we got to this space ahead of time, was that the coaches were like the end all be all. I mean, it was like they said it and it was gold, and if they didn't say it, we didn't do it. And so we had to really find a way to kind of shift and change that practice. And so this is where we ultimately ended up. Robin, do you want to say anything about those pieces?
I was just going to say, when we first came, we had to be really strategic about the personalities that we brought on as coaches. And I have no shame in saying, like, I have a very dominant, strong personality. Like, if you do any of those color chart personality things, like, I'm a red, like, we're going to get it done and it better be good. So we needed some people to soften me out. So the writing coach that we hired at the time was like all feelings and butterflies and sunshine and like baking cookies, because that's not me. But that was a key piece in kind of getting that buy-in, is approaching the personalities that we brought on as well. But it's also helpful because when you're helping different teachers, it's like you can match personalities with different people, so you have more options, which has really helped us in that battle from those first few years here.
Absolutely. So the first thing that we tried to do before we did anything else is, in addition to strengthening our coaching staff, we also created something that we call an instructional leadership team. And the idea behind that really is shared and distributive leadership and building capacity between and among the people that are actually in the trenches doing the work. Because I can get up here and say anything I want to say. And the truth is I haven't been in a classroom in a long time, and they know that because I've been an administrator in this district. So as credible as I might seem, and as much as I get up there and do PD with them and pre-planning, and that's like, I always enjoy that because it's the time I really get to teach, and I love teaching. I didn't leave teaching because I didn't love it and was ready to move on. that's a whole nother story for another day. But I love to teach. And so as much as I love that, I also realized that teaching has changed, since I've come out of the classroom. And so we have really tried to create a space here where everything is for us, by us. It's for teachers, by teachers, so that we can really create spaces where people feel comfortable and trusting enough to be able to solicit support and be able to feel comfortable when all those monitoring pieces happen. So ultimately, we created an instructional leadership team. The coaches are on the team, but the rest of the people on the team are teachers from each of the departments in the school. We have 10 different departments, and there's a representative from each department, and they're not the department heads. I already hear that person's voice at the leadership team meeting. So I really wanted people to be just traditional teachers who are willing to step up and lead from the front of the room, ultimately. So we did that. And together, this is sort of the system that we created in order to be able to effectively enhance professional development, our PLCs, support, and then, of course, to provide sort of a roadmap for the coaches to determine what they needed to do and focus on. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. But ultimately, when we got here, we realized there was a lot of emotion. And so we had to find a way to really ground ourselves in data. So whether that was student achievement data or teacher observation data, that's sort of where we began to mine to figure out, okay, where do we need to go? What do we need to do? And we took all of those data points and we brought those to our leadership team and our instructional leadership team. And we started to have them sort of mine that data and make some assumptions and some, analyze the data for what they think might be our issues. We were conducting root cause analysis and trying to figure out where do we go from here. And so ultimately that led to the creation of what we call instructional priorities. And I'll share those with you in just a minute for what we do this year. But we created instructional priorities, and that's usually 2 to 3 things that the data says we have to work on. And ultimately, that becomes the entire focal point for every coach in my school, every administrator in my school, every piece of feedback I offer you. Every time I walk into your room, you know exactly what I'm looking for because you helped me create the look fors for instructional priorities that you helped me establish. And that's not just the ILT, but we also brought that back to the whole faculty to make sure that we were all on the same page. And then from those instructional priorities, we sort of create 2 spaces, and we create a supportive space, and then we have to have a monitoring piece. So one of the things that was missing when I got to the school was accountability. There was no inspection of what was expected. Everybody was just kind of like doing their own thing. And so that doesn't work for me because I'm a psychopath. And so that was not going to happen. I had to figure out how do we bring this in so we can make sure that we're doing what's right for kids. So ultimately, we created a monitoring space. And this monitoring space is not just for administrators to monitor. Coaches are helpful in that monitoring. Other administrators are helpful, but so are my lead teachers and my department heads or subject area leaders. All of those folks have the opportunity to be in on this, as do any of our instructional leadership team members who are interested in being a part of that process. And we don't push anybody there. We certainly let them make their way to that space. But ultimately, we do things like right on time walkthroughs where we come through and we just talk about the good. So when Robin walks through your classroom, she's not evaluating you as part of that process in the coaching role because that's not her job. And if she comes in there and starts to evaluate you, you're going to lose your trust for her. And Crystal and Devania's talked a lot about trust between coach and principal, but I think equally important is the level of trust between the coach and the teachers that they're supposed to be supporting. And so I kind of have this is going to sound very juvenile, but I have a no snitching rule. So if you're a coach and you're coming to me to snitch on what you saw in the classroom, then I don't need you. I don't need you to snitch. I need you to fix it. I need you to help that teacher get better. And so the role between me and you is not that you come run everything back to me. It's that you're going to help build that teacher up so that I never have to know there was a problem. Because if you can fix it, then I don't have to. And that's sort of the goal. So we really try to lift teachers up. We try to give them that positive, support and that positive praise. We do instructional priority walkthroughs. So each quarter, one of our instructional priorities is sort of turned into a Google Doc, if you will, with the look fors that the teachers have agreed upon. And we just go through to see what trends we have. So once again, it's not evaluative. They don't even write teachers' names down. I don't even care who the teacher was. What I want to be able to see is at my next instructional leadership team meeting, I want us to be able to pull that up and my coaches to see what is not there. What are we missing from that instructional priority? And the same thing with my ILT. What are we missing there so that we can figure out what PD we need to have and what kind of support the teachers are going to require, whether in an individual coaching cycle, a small group, or whatever. Likewise, we have required observations, and then we have something called instructional learning walks. that our district does with our regional superintendents. So they come through and they sort of bring every content area supervisor and they monitor your plans and what's going on in your classrooms, and you conduct observations and we give feedback, and all of those things then are shared with the teachers. And that's another door for us. That's another door for the coach. Hey, let me tell you what your glow was today. Let me tell you what your grow was today. I'm available on Monday morning to talk about that if you want to get together. So we try to use all of these systematic approaches to open doors for us to be able to sit down and talk with teachers. And then of course, the other side of that is monitoring those student and common formative and summative assessments. That data is also really pertinent to what we're doing in that space. Robin, anything from you about monitoring? Okay. And then regarding support, we do two different things. We have a really strong PLC situation, and then we also do some pretty strong professional development. So our PLC process is really interesting. About a year and a half ago, we decided that once we looked at all the data and kept tracking all these things, at first we thought, oh, our teachers are struggling with lesson planning, but they weren't struggling with lesson planning. They had a plan. They couldn't execute the plan. And so we determined, based on the ILT and coach feedback and all the things that had happened during observations, that we needed to give teachers an opportunity to rehearse their lesson in front of their colleagues prior to teaching it. So we have a 2-part PLC process in our school, twice a month on Mondays, and the same teacher basically goes for both rounds. And so that first round, the teacher brings a lesson to the table, they do a lesson rehearsal protocol, and so their colleagues have an opportunity to provide them feedback on whatever it is that they see. Administrators and coaches are now walking through these conversations though, so that we can see the kind of feedback that has had to been given to this person, so that we can also understand that when we get to the PD part, what teachers might need based on the kind of feedback that was required during those conversations in PLC. That second round is looking at student work. So you've gotten feedback from your colleagues, you've adjusted your lesson, you taught your lesson, and now you're bringing student work from that lesson to determine, did the students meet the outcomes that were expected as a result of the lesson that you ultimately rehearsed and shared? On the other side of that is our professional development. And we do instructional priority specific learning walks. We do differentiated PD day and ed camps, coaching cycles, and we have new teacher wingmen and support sessions. And I'm gonna let Robin talk to you about that, because the coaches and the other ILT members are the ones who really rock those things and really support and lead those at our school.
So one of the things that we do are the instructional priority specific learning walks. And what we do is each quarter, we take one of those instructional priorities to focus on, just like with the walkthrough forms. Each quarter, we focus on an individual, because if you will see them soon, like there's a lot of look fors. They can be a little overwhelming. So we focus on one a quarter, and they kind of build on each other too. So it kind of makes sense to look at them that way. We visit classrooms. Teachers volunteer themselves to open their classrooms up for us to walk through. We try and visit different content areas, different levels. We are Title I, so we do have funds to buy subs. Our learning walks only last 2 periods, so we are able to use one sub to cover multiple teachers, so that it works out great. We go through, we look at evidence of the look fors within that classroom, only obviously looking for what is there, not what isn't, because we want to stay positive. It's really just seeing how other teachers are implementing these things in their classrooms to get ideas. We come back, we debrief that, we talk about implications for their own classrooms, like what did they learn, what do they want to try, what support might they need in trying those things. And then we also look at it at a more broad level and say, okay, well, what does this mean for us as a school? And sometimes we will address like, hey, we didn't see this one look for in any classroom. Maybe that's something we need more PD on. Or we're like, hey, this teacher rocked it out with this look for, maybe they can offer a session at the next ed camp. So again, all of that information, I take it back to the ILT, and then it kind of determines the thing that comes next. We try and do one every quarter as well, the differentiated PD and ed camps. So those are small little PD sessions, completely developed and run by teachers. They say, hey, I want to share this, or we're like, hey, you're really great at this. Can you share this? And teachers have choice in what sessions they go to. And we do run them like traditional ed camp. So if you get in that room and it's not what you thought it was going to be, or it's not what you want, cool, you go to another one. They're not like PowerPoint driven professional developments. It's sit down, let's have a conversation. How do you do this? What can I learn from you? What can you learn from me? And then they rotate through. Coaching cycles are obviously determined in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's teachers coming to us like, hey, I really want to try this. It's actually been great in ELA this year. that's a double-edged sword. We have new curriculum, new benchmarks, new standards, new everything this year in ELA, and they are vastly different than what we had before. So there's a learning curve for everyone. I also have a group of teachers that have only ever taught on the previous standards that were very skill-based, and these are very content-driven. So we've had a lot of opportunities for coaching cycles within our ELA department this year, just trying to learn what works and what doesn't. We've realized that there's a lot of gaps that we need to fill, so we're working together to do that. Sometimes it's a matter of an administrator noticing a need, obviously, when they're doing observations and like, hey, I've recommended that this teacher work with you. And that's where like the personality matching also comes into play. Larissa and our other administrators are really great at knowing the coach's strengths and like what our kind of superpowers are in terms of instruction and personality. So they will specifically recommend, and just because like the science coach is labeled the science coach, like she's worked with one of my ELA teachers because she just has some skills that would really benefit that teacher. So really we have content titles, but we don't really work that way. No one puts me in math though. That would be a disaster. They don't need me in there at all. They don't need Larissa in there either. So those are the coaching cycle. They're as needed and kind of also approached in different ways. We also offer like little PD sessions that I guess they could fall under the differentiated PD within department meetings. A lot of us have moved to flip department meetings. So we just email out our notes and they can read them because they're adults and hopefully they can be professional and do that. And then we run the time that we would spend as our department meetings as little mini PD sessions. So like specifically in ELA, our teachers are like, hey, we don't get these standards. We don't get these benchmarks. So the writing coach and I like dropped everything, completely replanned everything we were doing and developed these little mini PDs where we could get some standards-based instruction practice.
And let me say this, because I think this is really important. I didn't approve any of that. I didn't approve not a single part of that, because we're to the place here now at Leto that I don't micromanage what they do, because I know that even in my absence, she can tell you what's in my head. And so can the other coaches, because we have spent so much time together talking about our goals, our mission, the expectations, and how those align to our instructional priorities, that I am confident that every single decision that they make is going to be the best interest of kids and in the best interest of teachers, aligned to our instructional priorities. And so when they do these things, I mean, they'll say, hey, just so you know, we're going to do this today. I'm like, that's great. That sounds fantastic. I don't get in their way. A very smart man once told me, he was my principal many years ago. He said, Larissa, if you ever become a principal, and you should someday, and this is that whole administrative conversation we weren't going to get into, but if you ever do this, he said, the one thing that you're supposed to do is surround yourself with people who are good at things that you're not and get out of their way. And so I believe him. And I also know that there's getting out of their way and leaving them completely to hang on their own. And so that's not what he meant. He just meant once you know exactly what your expectation is, and once they do, as long as you can trust them and they understand the expectation, they're going to get you exactly where you need to be, and you need to get out of their way. And so that was a huge lesson in leadership for me, to make sure that I kind of did that, because I'll tell you, I have the ability to be a type A psychopath who comes in and tries to take over everything. I have that ability. But I really, over the last 10 years, probably have also been really impacted by the idea of shared and distributed leadership and in building capacity. And I saw when I got to this school how much didn't exist and how important it was to make sure that no matter what happens, I want to make sure that when I leave here, that this place is better off than when I came, and that people can allow or take these wonderful systems that we put into place and use them without me or without Robin or without whomever.
Larissa, thank you so much. I'm going to jump in here because you guys have given so much information. I want to be sure we have some time for Q&A from people. I know Crystal has been doing an excellent job, as have others, about answering questions in the chat. I want all of our people who are joining us to know that if you registered for this webinar, you will be sent a recording link, and it will have the chat too. So you'll have all of those answers and you'll have all of those links. But I want to be sure that we have an opportunity to ask questions. So if you have a question, please put it into the chat. Quite a few people have asked, and I'm going to direct this question towards Crystal, because it started, Crystal and Devanya both, because it started coming in early on as you were talking. I'm reading the question as I'm looking down. They love the way your meeting format and all that you shared, and they want to know how long are your meetings.
Sure. So we have collaborative planning time. So our teachers take our students to specials, and the specials time lasts about 45 minutes. We also have roles in those meetings. So we have a timer, and you'll hear different sounds go off that allows the teachers to get back to their specials time. So the meetings are scheduled for 45, but once everyone gets in place, it's about 35 minutes that happens 2 days a week, Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays. The teachers are in that open planning where they do not have the administrators and coaches in their meetings. And then Tuesday and Wednesday is our literacy and math mandatory days of planning with the instructional team.
So it sounds like you've built a lot of structure into even how that time is used. It's not just you have an hour to meet. There's structure within that as well.
Definitely, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. We had a question about, the last item, the new teacher wingmen and support sessions. Robin, can you tell us just briefly about what those are?
Sure. We actually have a gentleman on campus. He's like a half instructional coach, kind of new teacher mentor. And he works specifically on that program where he provides professional development and support for our new teachers, whether they're new to teaching, new to the district, new to LATO, and kind of an acclimation process, depending on their need. He pairs them up with teachers within their content area as another layer of support as well. And then he makes sure that they're obviously meeting any of the demands of the programs within the district that they're required to as a new teacher, but also making sure that they're aware of our systems and our processes, matching them with coaches if they need that as well. And sometimes even we work together with him with a teacher that's addressing certain, because he has great talents too. And he came from elementary. So his brain is so different than mine or a lot of the coaches that we've all been in high school for a long time. So it's really helpful. Larissa also just kind of posted in the chat if you like to read it, what he does as well.
Awesome. I want to thank our panelists for all the wealth of resources that they've shared there. And again, remind everyone who's attending the webinar that when you get the chat, you'll have all of those links shared there. I think that as I think about wrapping all of this up, because I see, unfortunately, we're almost out of time. This is a subject we could all talk about and learn from you all for so long. What I'm really hearing is about, number one, the level of communication that all of you have. You have incredible relationships. I could see it between principals and coaches, and that the communication flows freely. It truly is about that shared leadership, with the principal being the instructional leadership and the coaches being a valuable part of that shared or distributed leadership. And I also really strongly am taking away the structure and the intentionality behind the structured use of time and the structured use of coaching as a valuable resource, that it's not just something you throw out there haphazardly. It is a highly effective resource that is valuable. And it has to be planned for intentionally, and it has to be supported as an intentional resource. So I want to thank all of you panelists for everything that you've brought, your wisdom, your experience, your openness with talking to us today and answering questions. I look forward to inviting you all back again. I do want to point out before everybody has to sign off and go on to do other things, that we have resources available to help principals and coaches and to help advance these kinds of conversations if you haven't had them and you're just starting to. On our website, and the links are here on the screen and they'll be in the chat, we have role-based action guides and innovation configuration maps around the standards. We have them role specific. You see here principal and coach. We have other roles as well. But for the people who are involved in that principal coach relationship, to sit down with the action guides or the innovation configuration maps, they can really help you think about what's your part of this work, what's my part of this work, and what have we forgotten to talk about that we need to be talking about. You definitely want that link for the coaching resource page from Learning Forward's website. You have to have the link to navigate there, and there are amazing resources collected there for instructional coaches. Our journal, The Learning Professional, always has articles and columns on instructional coaching, on instructional leadership, on principals and coaches working together. We encourage you to become a member of Learning Forward and get the journal. Go to the website and you'll find articles posted there and archived there. We also want to share with you on the next slide. We want to invite you actually to fill out a survey and let us know what you thought about this webinar. We're always trying to improve these and be sure that we're bringing you information that's timely and useful. So we appreciate hearing about your experience and how this was meaningful for you and what you're taking away. And finally, we want to tell you that we have some online courses coming up. If you want to learn more about the standards, there is an online virtual course coming up. Standards Week is also coming up. Every year we celebrate the standards. We have daily webinars, we have new tools, we talk about implementing them. And that's of interest to anyone with an interest in professional learning and building capacity for educators. The standards course is a virtual course that's a deep dive introduction into the standards. So if you aren't familiar with them, I highly recommend that you check out that course and think about joining us for that. And finally, there are some other online resources here. This is a reminder of some of the things we shared. Again, links are in the chat. And as we roll up to the top of the hour, I want to again thank all of our panelists for joining us and all of you who joined us live streaming as well as in the webinar. Thank you for all your sharing in the chat, and thank you for caring and being such passionate, dedicated educators. Learning Forward, we are happy to serve you in your professional learning. We look forward to talking with you all again.